Creating safe, equitable, and engaging schools is the cornerstone that many of us believe should be at the heart of school reform and improvement. It is also the title of a book edited by David Osher, Vice President of AIR. This podcast is one of three, and it brings to bear the student's idea of each one of these topics. With David Osher as the moderator, these recordings were made in the summer of 2022 and reflect a very different insight into how schools function. David.
Thank you, Richard. When you and I discussed convening this group, I decided to go to people across the country who have been learning from the unfiltered voices of students and asking them if they would help identify a bunch of people from all over the country who can give us their unvarnished perceptions and experience of safety. These are students who were in their junior and senior year. They have experienced safety or the lack of safety in big schools and small schools, some in many places. And I think when they came together, they did not know each other, with the exception of two siblings who knew each other through their siblingness, but they both shared a set of perceptions that were unique to their own lived experience and to their own context, and at the same time discovered and shared while listening to each other some profound commonalities. Students are the heart of why we have schools, and they are also, in their experience, the heart of whether or not we will be succeeding in what we do in schools. And while everyone in a school is important as a source of information and as a source of input into making the school better, students are particularly important regarding two things that the rest of us are more distant from. One is how they experience what is happening. There's a difference between what people may think is going on. There's a difference between what we may be intending to do and what is experienced by a young person. And we need to hear that voice. And that experiential voice is not just about what they experience happening to them behaviorally, but what is happening in them psychologically as they are experiencing what is going on in a school. So one of the two reasons is the fact that they really can let us know what is happening at the point of learning, what is happening at the point of thriving and well-being. The second thing is everybody in the school sees some things from their own position. And at the same time, they can't see certain things. And students can help us see things that are available to them in their position in the school. I'll give you an analogy. When my oldest son was about 4 years old, we gave him an Instamatic camera. This is a camera that you could just take a picture very easily. And as soon as we saw what he produced, we saw the world through the eyes of someone who was short. We weren't looking from above fences, we were looking in the fences. Well, in the same way, teachers, administrators know a lot about what's going on in the school. But at the same time, there are things that they don't see. And we need to hear students for that reason. There are two big things that the audiences ought to be listening to. One is the student's own description of what an experience like safety is. What does it mean to them? And the second thing is in what at the point where people really were safe, I should say, where they really felt like they were safe, or they really felt like they were not safe, what was going on? What were other people doing that contributed to that sense of safety, that experience of safety, or that experience and sense of unsafety? So it's both getting a picture of the lay of the land, in this case of safety, but then really being in a particular moment where people are really feeling safe or really feeling unsafe, and getting a sense of what was going on external to the student that contributed to that powerful experience.
And now to hear from the students themselves. Each will speak to their perception. They are listening to each other, and you'll get a sense of how they think individually, but also collectively.
So I think a key feature of safety, I think about it physically first. So I was thinking security in schools, especially. I know it varies from school to school, state to state. In Hawaii, it's very different in terms of security because we have open campuses. Therefore, you have to walk out of each classroom into like the outside and into another classroom. And in many scenarios, into like new buildings across campus. And we do have like gates and fences around the campuses as well. So it makes it easier to be safe and secure within the campus. However, there are times when people that aren't supposed to be there may randomly be on campus. And I think that our security guards here, they usually have the golf carts to get around just so it's easier to get from place to place. And I think that is something that I would consider one of the things that makes me feel really safe in school, especially because right on the other side of the gate, there could be people smoking or trying to get a bus. And I think one situation would be like, I think I was in middle school when there was a lockdown drill and I was in the bathroom and I didn't know because it comes on the intercom, but everything was like dead silent and I had to be escorted back. But I think what made me feel really safe in that moment was the fact that security had come to check the bathrooms and was able to escort me out of the bathroom.
A key feature of a school where I feel safe would be a gate. Obviously, gates can be jumped and stuff like that. But I think that having incontrovertible entrances and exits that can be opened and closed when needed make me feel pretty secure. My school was an outdoor school, so I do think that kind of contributes to how I feel. It wasn't one big building. It was many different buildings, and we had a gate around the school. One situation where I felt particularly safe was in middle school because there was a robbery across the street from the school. And we had a swift response to secure the campus, account for all the students, and inform students and parents of the situation without causing unnecessary alarm.
From a personal experience, I think the best way to make a school safe is to have metal detectors and security guards. I say this because a couple months ago during my senior year and 2 years before during my sophomore year, someone from my school made a fake social media account and threatened to strip the school. And it was a scary thing to think about because I can remember talking to some associates and they all said the same thing, that a school shooting should never and would never take place in Ohio. And it was just a scary thing to think that, wow, what if this is real? This could actually hurt a lot of people. And our floor has like 3 different floors. That's over 1,000 kids and we only have 3 security guards. So we didn't necessarily have the resources to actually be prepared if something like this were to happen. So I think in today's age, sadly, the most way to make sure that people in a building are safe is to have like some security present and some metal detectors to make sure that if they try to bring a firearm into a building, it can be compensated and it can be dealt with appropriately.
So I thought about it more like on a national level when you asked the question. And I believe that safety stems from a lot of understanding, balance, and a well thought out system. What I mean by that is in order to be safe, like for an example, when it comes to guns, I believe that that's something that should be balanced. We should encounter the safety of others while also taking into account that some people might need guns to feel safe in their own house. Or if we do need like a well thought out system so that what's happening now is not happening, especially on a national level. I mean, ever since the shooting in, I think Texas it was, there have at least been like 10 more mass shootings. And that's just that we know of. And it's gotten out of hand. So I do think that we just need more politicians that are actually going to take into the account that people don't feel safe. And I think that is one of the bare necessities that every American has the right to and every person has the right to. And I generally feel safe in my school. But as Jeremiah said, there have been a couple of threats where I did not feel safe, especially 2 months ago. There was one where we had to hide out in our school because of a code blue. And I definitely believe that we just need a lot more work done when it comes to safety because it's one of the most basic things in the hierarchy of needs. People need food, shelter, and they need to feel safe.
I live on the south side of Chicago. And again, to me, safety is being able to go out of your house and come back home safely. Safety is being able to ride a bike in your environment without the fear of being shot. Safety is being able to hang out with your friends outside. I don't have any friends. I don't go outside because from my bedroom, I hear gunshots. So the one time where I felt particularly unsafe was when there was a shooting at my school and a security guard and a student was shot. I don't think that I've ever felt safe in my school or my house because shooting just happened like literally everywhere. And I know my school do try their best. We have a lot of security guards. We have metal detectors. Like there was a time metal detector caught a student bringing a gun inside the school, a knife inside the school, tasers. But I still don't feel safe where I live. But I know like my school particularly is trying their best. My school is trying their best. But where I live, I don't think there is enough resources for us to be safe.
I'm going to take it in a little bit of a different direction. Of when I think of safety is more of a mental stability, like the feeling of being mentally stable and mentally safe, because physical safety has already been mentioned. So understanding is something that I often associate with safety, understanding student situations, understanding circumstances. And I'm talking about mental health and also cultural competence. If a certain person doesn't feel like they're understood, if they feel like they're being misconceptualized or stereotyped or pushed away or disregarded and things like that, that wouldn't make me feel safe. And understanding mental health is also something I think is really, really important in our schools. And that makes students feel safer when they know that they're supported in their mental health. A scenario related to this is I was working with my Senate on some issues with racism in our school. I'm in a very white community and our students of color weren't feeling safe. And it was really, really hard to get it into administration's heads that our students aren't feeling safe because they just weren't taking the time to understand that anybody other than white males couldn't be safe. So I think just taking the time to understand both mental health and educating yourself on cultural competence can make your students feel safe and can make your peers feel safe.
I would have to agree with the list. And I would actually like to add on to that because in the community I serve with, we have a very diverse community. So we have immigrant families, we have African American and Black families that live here, a lot of Hispanic and Latinx families, and we're starting to see more Middle Eastern families here. So it's diverse all around. There's color all around. And I think when it comes to schools, when they look at statistics, it often maintains that youth are putting in enough effort as they should be. They don't have the grades that they want to see. So they could be seen as more prone to being violent. They could be uneducated. There could be all these scenarios that of who they will probably become, but not necessarily meet the standards that they think. So I think that plays a big part because I think in the community where they grow up in, they should feel safe all around because of how diverse the community is. Just knowing one another, understanding each other, no matter what the other person may go through. It's all about not being indifferent. If you see somebody struggling, to just look the other way, but offer to support, be there, even if you can't necessarily help physically, financially, but also be there emotionally. I think there's many factors that play into that. And I see recently, I've just been seeing on the news of gun violence, mass shootings at school. And it's like, at a young age like this, for elementary school students, for middle school students, they should never have to see that. I think they should never have to see or have a day where they have to learn on how to be protected in their own classroom when, our kindergartners are just trying to learn the ABC. But I do think the idea of still enforcing those type of policies or just having those factors that say the worst case scenario is important. And I think I appreciate those educators who have actually stepped up to be there for the kids, to make that extra step.
I agree with everyone. I believe physical safety is incredibly important. And as we all know, you can't learn if you're not physically safe. But one thing that I would think of is safety in financial terms, just to go on a different path. Of course, there's physical violence, but there's also neglect within our communities, neglect from the government or neglect from other community members or even in families. So I would say safety really depends on the whole student, not only how they feel at school, but also how they feel at home. I felt safe multiple times with my staff members at school, which is great. But I thought it was especially important when one of my counselors actually stepped up to try her best to get a scholarship for me. She knew I wouldn't be able to attend college without scholarships. And I was really grateful for that, because that's not really an example of safety, but I think that is an example of going above and beyond, and where she looked at the holistic type of person and not just the academic side.
What we just heard was really rather profound and interesting, because each one of the students built off of each other as we thought they might, but in some rather different ways that give this kind of 360 sense of what safety is. Being physically safe in home, the school, the community, and mental well-being as well as financial. In the environment and the intrapersonal and interpersonal come into play in some really fascinating ways that I'd never thought about.
What we were hearing from the young people is the multidimensional nature of safety. Oftentimes when policymakers talk about safety, they talk about it in a unidimensional way. And while there is an element of safety that exists in any one dimension, if you only address that dimension, you're not going to be realizing your goal, which is to create a safe place. Being punched, being hit, worrying about being shot is profoundly painful and worrisome. But so is being humiliated or worrying about the fact that you will be humiliated. And what we're hearing from the young people was how those multiple dimensions come into play, and how if we want to address those multiple dimensions, we also have to be thinking about the multiple but also interconnected enablers that contribute to why someone will feel not only physically safe, but emotionally and psychologically safe. Not only safe as a student, but also safe as somebody with their own particular identity, nested in their family, nested in their friends, nested in all the things that any young person is both embracing and worrying about as she or he is growing up.
I think one of the things that amazed me in terms of the physical safety side is how absolutely observant these students are in noticing what the responsible adults around them are providing for. They talk about fences, they talk about armed guards, enough armed guards, and what they do to protect them. They are very much aware when something's inadequate and that the threat is there, and they're focused on it. I think your concept of policy being unidimensional is spot on. I had a professor once who called this bunny rabbit thinking. Something pops up and you just run towards it and you think you've fixed it.
Among the best work in design, in engineering, in the development of new technologies has been when end users are involved in the design of products, because you need to understand from their perspective why something works and doesn't work. And not only does good design involve end users at the design moment, but also at the evaluation moment to make sure that what was intended is happening. And I think just as in industry, when you want to be successful, you really have to involve the end user in the design. If you're smart, you will do it. So in education, we need to bring in the end user, the student, if we want to design an environment for him or her. Now, obviously, that also is important for teachers or for other school staff. But here, where the people who embody the outcome of public schools are our students, we have to bring them into the design process, and we have to bring them into the evaluation process.
One of the things that struck me, David, was when listening to each one individually, the sense of vulnerability that I heard in their voice anyway, and we've discussed this, but that as they built on each other, since the first person talked to kind of very specifically to the question, as they built on each other, insights became more profound. And like being together, building together, they became a group of student voices that was more profound than if we just listened to one of them.
You're very right, Rich. You and I were involved in the translation of a book.
Yes.
And one of the things that came out of that translation was a Spanish word for making things more profound, for deepening. And what can occur when you bring young people together in learning spaces and also in improvement space is that profoundizing. It's when people both speak from their own knowledge, from their own lived experience, but also interaction, in co-action with other people, deepen what they say, and make even richer connections.
David, I think this section of our 3-part series on student voice has really introduced us to an impressive world that many of us just think of as being a small part. Yes, it's a small part, but for these people, this is the big part.
That's
and
right.
for the learner, if we're about learners and learning, we need to demonstrate how we're here for the kids by listening to the kids. And I think your book, Creating Safe, Equitable, Engaging Schools, and the Spanish version, as you've mentioned, has taught us some fascinating things about the interaction of people and ideas. David, thank you for your time and your guidance.
Thank you, Rich, for your leadership and for all that the Learning First Alliance does for young people.